I came home on Friday, bone-tired and feeling useless, only to find my house magically clean. My best friends had snuck in while I worked. How did I miss this act of love? I wondered as I sobbed, realizing how dissociated I had truly been. How many others hide their pain? Leaving work on Friday, I felt utterly useless and bone-tired, yet had nothing to show for it. However, I returned home to a clean house and a cheerful puppy, which was the one thing I could hold on to as a victory. It seemed like the only thing I had done correctly all week. As I cried myself to sleep, clutching my poor dog Walnut and vaguely aware that a block of chocolate was melting into the sheets beneath me, a realization struck me. The fact is, I did not remember cleaning my house. Not yesterday. Not the day before. In fact, not even the week before. All I could recall was wishing all that mess away. It could not have been me washing the dishes or putting them away. I had no memory of removing the piles of actual garbage on the stove or letting the dog out. I did not remember scrubbing the puppy vomit off the carpet. I had been so dissociated that I did not even register it all day. So I got out of bed and stared at the clean patch of rug, my mind struggling to catch up. I swear, I felt like I had stepped into the twilight zone. It turns out my best friend and her partner had come over while I was at work. They did their nails, ate some food, petted the dog, and then they cleaned my house. No note, no you're welcomes. How much of my life have I spent completely dissociated, unmoored, and emotionally isolating to the extent that I could not even recognize the physical evidence of someone else's quiet, loving care? It is a sobering thought that I do not even dare to begin unpacking. The human brain, however, is wild, isn't it? The way it obscures our pain from us, how it persuades us into believing this is normal. It distorts our problems just enough to provide us with the bandwidth to remain sociable. Take, for example, how obsessed some of us become with true crime stories, documentaries about religious indoctrination, books about escaping cults, and news about entire communities voting against their own interests. We pity the victims and pretend to be baffled by their inaction. We sift through their stories looking for something, anything, that proves we are different, that we are safe, that our troubles are inconsequential. We distance ourselves by consuming these extraordinary events and irrational actions. We use the horror as fuel for our own sense of security and sanity. In reality, we are just recording our own troubled podcast episode. We remain blind to the ways we experience the exact same situations. On a different scale. Yes, perhaps. Some days I would be having coffee with colleagues, curled up watching a movie with friends, chatting incessantly, even laughing, afraid that if I stopped for just 1 second my focus would crack, my thoughts would seep in through the fissures, and I would be forced to confront them. Meanwhile, parts of my body, my diaphragm, my ribs, my eyes, every muscle in my abdomen were tensed and engaged in screaming. It just never made it past my throat. I recall my psychiatrist once pausing mid-session to gently inquire, nearly breaking me with his question. How often do you scream like this? It was the first and only time he touched my knee or any part of me, for that matter. I never gave him an answer I could not. The question briefly halted the runaway train of my words, allowing me to realize the extent of what I had just described. Instead, I sobbed violently for the remainder of the session. Even now, this devastates me. It is heartbreaking to imagine how many individuals sit side by side at dinner tables or in lecture halls, catching up over coffee or playing with their little nieces and nephews, while silently screaming. It takes one to recognize one. I will try to be more observant. And say hello. Here's the reality: I am a spreadsheet enthusiast. I meticulously track my numbers. I will be damned if I ever let myself miss a milestone. It provides me with an illusion of control, of hope for the future. Of course, I will be here in 2043. I have that goal to achieve, don't I? Knowing my figures is everything. And yet, for all the years I have been donating to Shine and Pet Refuge for victims of domestic violence, I operated a script that logged my donations into my Excel sheet and then automatically hid the row from view. So I would not have to see them. Would not have to think about them. What a perfect metaphor for my life. In these past few weeks, I have been preparing for a testimony. It has been nothing short of traumatic. It required emotionally revisiting every moment that rendered me powerless. Collecting medical records, screenshotting messages, reaching out to friends I had blocked out of cowardice, providing names in hopes of producing a testimony, and rereading threats I once believed defined my self-worth. condensing an ineffable stretch of experience into a single, comprehensible timeline while scarcely understanding how I even arrived here and who I am. Re-listening to words that once convinced me any effort was futile, that my future was predetermined, or that I did not deserve one, that my dog was the only reason I existed. I want to smash my phone screen, climb through it, hug my past self, hold myself, yank myself out. But even if I had the power, she would have kicked and scratched and blocked me anyway. If I am honest, part of me still desires to slip back into that warped comfort zone of isolation, which, if you squint hard enough, passes for peace. It is comparatively easy to glide on autopilot, sharing the occasional weekend puppy picture for the obligatory social mask upkeep. It is still muscle memory to ghost people who get too close, to block friends merely for expressing concern, to leave messages on read, then unread, for months until I delete them to stop them from haunting me. Even a simple hello can feel like an insurmountable burden. Some part of me still believes strength equates to silence, aware of the cost of invisibility is connection but weary from paying it. How does one simply disappear from their own life? You shrink. You check out. You minimize your life, rendering your impact meaningless and your contributions worthless. You grieve every joyful moment instead of experiencing it because happiness is just so fleeting, until the thought of not showing up at all begins to feel like kindness. A relief, maybe even a gift to others. So that is nice. Even now, revisiting everything often leaves me feeling hollow, like I am still just a thing, not a person, no autonomy, no agency. Still trudging through the week like a placeholder until a time when I am replaced by something better, like debris shaped into a vaguely human form. Like a complete stranger, some weak imposter is wearing my skin and not quite passing. And every time my body aches or an old injury flares up, I still find myself loathing the past version of me who allowed this to happen. The temptation to shut it all down is ever present. I have been so tempted to block out everything, delete everything, compartmentalize. One delayed bus away from quitting. One spilled coffee away from completely unraveling. One burnt toast away from retracting my statements or leaving everything behind to start anew where no one knows my name. I am exhausted from convincing myself that speaking out will matter. Emotionally drained from feeling undeserved empathy for a monster. Just fatigued from not being able to stop feeling sorry for someone else's actions. Doubting whether staying silent makes me vindictive, if speaking out makes me cruel, if my refusal to merely move on casts me as the villain in this narrative. Yet some individuals are simply inhumane. I should write something on the mirror to remind me each morning, though that may not be healthy either. I do not know what the solution is. What do I say when they ask? We hear you. So what is your goal here? What are you hoping to achieve? What solution would you like to see from us? I do not know. I am tired. I want to rage at the injustice of it all. I am angry and disillusioned that the responsibility always falls on us to create change and make a difference. To be credible. To be prepared. To be composed. To supply the evidence, the timeline, and the emotional labor. And to provide it compellingly, for heaven help us if we fail. If we do not execute perfectly, we risk enduring a lifetime of shame and guilt for not stopping the cycle before it harms someone else. It should never be the responsibility of the harmed person to become the archivist of their own suffering or the advocate for their own justice. But it is. Time and again it is. And the system dares to demand it as if it is a reasonable cost of being believed. Unblocking my first friend last week was more challenging than I care to admit. I was just terrified I would block them again for saying, "I'm so sorry, Alex, you were right. It was never your fight to fight. But thank you for being the first one to have my back, for holding my hand through the hearings, for never once saying, well, I told you so. Because of you, I might still have a chance to rebuild some of the many bridges I had nearly burned. Right now, though, I am beginning to feel quite proud of myself, sort of good enough to clean the carpet myself at some point. It is a small thing, but it matters looking down at the mess and seeing my reflection a little clearer than it has been in weeks. For the first time in what feels like forever, I do not feel guilty, but rather impressed for accomplishing the bare minimum. Getting out of bed, showing up, walking the dog, cooking some food, okay, maybe not that one just yet. But things I used to take for granted or do without thinking now feel like victories, so I will allow that. When someone says, I miss you, I no longer think, why, or at least not for too long, I will allow that too. Through this process, the more I immerse myself in supportive spaces, the more two conflicting feelings grow within me. On one hand, there is immense and twisted relief in finding corroboration, validation, gaps in the story, missing pieces of the timeline, and confirmation that I am not insane after all. On the other hand, how can I feel grateful while experiencing the gut-wrenching devastation of just how many of us exist out here? Horrified at how many people can navigate life side by side while concealing their identical stories, feeling isolated, gaslit into silence, and fearing for their futures. Divided by a common denominator. It makes me want to reach out, shout, and create some sort of loud, chaotic noise so that we can all hear each other. I do not know how to even begin, especially when I am striving for an end. I am saddened that I did not act sooner, that I allowed myself to be consumed by shame. I know it is an unfair feeling. Not every struggle is visible, and not every visible struggle is explainable. If you are carrying something, know that you are not alone. You deserve better, and maybe you are not in fact barely hanging on, perhaps you are already standing tall. Time will reveal. In the meantime, I will have a walnut and carry on. Story 2. After 8 years, I'm lost in my relationship with my boyfriend. I didn't want to care about anyone else anymore, but communication issues led to doubts. He promises change, yet my heart isn't feeling much anymore. Can this love be saved, or is it already too late? Summary: I am concerned that I have jeopardized my good, stable, long-term relationship due to poor communication. Additionally, I am unsure why I cannot sufficiently appreciate my partner for trying to improve. I am feeling quite confused about the situation. I, 27 years old female, have been with my boyfriend, 31 years old male, for 8 years at this point. We have grown significantly together, lived together for years, have the best cats in the world, and I feel included in his family as well. My family situation is not ideal, which led to many mental health issues during my younger years, so it is truly comforting to finally have a safe space where I can be myself with minimal drama. Until the end of last year, I was certain that I wanted to marry him and start a family. Then I changed my job and finally felt content with my career for the first time since graduating a few years ago. The people there are very kind, and I can joke around without feeling the need to hide or conform too much, yet they still appreciate me. This was quite unexpected, and I am very thankful to have found a job that is engaging, challenging, and in which many of my coworkers are genuinely wonderful. I began to notice that I was not as happy and carefree at home, as there seemed to be too much daily routine occurring. Therefore, I decided to reclaim the fun side of myself and embrace a more carefree attitude around my boyfriend. We went to a party, had a bit to drink, and I impulsively kissed him right on the dance floor, reminiscent of the beginning of our relationship. I wanted to disregard everyone else because he is mine, so I considered it no big deal. To my surprise, he seemed delighted by this gesture. I had thought we had moved past such public displays of affection, as I certainly had not, but I assumed he was no longer interested since we often drifted apart at parties. He had many people to converse with, and I found my own friends to chat with, which was fine since we do not need to be together constantly, and it's also refreshing to engage with others outside of our relationship. However, it hurt to feel like we arrived and departed together, but did not interact much during the party. Eventually, I accepted it and moved on. I recognize now that this was an enormous mistake. I have struggled with self-esteem in the past, and I mistakenly believed he simply did not enjoy showing affection in public. I should have communicated my feelings and taken his hand, danced with him, and expressed, "I want to be present with you today because I love you." Instead, I suppressed my feelings to allow him to enjoy himself. I realize now that this was immature and foolish. He had previously mentioned during the early years of our relationship that he is not fond of holding hands and expressing affection in public. But I believe with better communication, we could have established a mutual understanding instead of me just bottling up my emotions. Due to my mental health challenges, I am not always easy to be around. However, after receiving a proper diagnosis and years of therapy, we both agree that I have improved significantly. I used to cry nearly every weekend, every time we met, without understanding why. Now I have matured and healed, which has led to increased happiness for both of us. Nonetheless, we still experience occasional difficulties when it comes to emotional support. He prefers peace and quiet when he is upset and is not always open to talking. This can be challenging for me, but I have learned and continue to strive to respect his boundaries. I try to let him work through his feelings and occasionally check in quietly to see if he needs anything, avoiding taking it personally. I am not always successful at that, but I make an effort. I require a significant amount of reassurance on days when I am feeling down. I long for physical comfort and his presence. I understand that it can be frustrating to just lie in bed with me while I cry and attempt to calm down when you had other plans for the day. However, I feel deeply hurt when he pulls out his phone to look at memes. I know that we both have ADHD and this is simply his coping mechanism, but it still stings and makes me feel as though my struggles with mental health are a nuisance to him. We have discussed this topic frequently and he often asks, "But what do you want me to do?" When I respond, "I just want you to be present with me, comfort me, and engage with me." As I know that this feeling will eventually pass, he seems frustrated by my request. Perhaps my expectations were unclear. I do not know, maybe he felt overwhelmed by my concerns, which is understandable. I just wish he had communicated that to me at the time or sought out some strategies for how to support me. I am at a loss. At one point, I discovered that he sometimes found me to be a bit too much when we were with his family. He is not entirely wrong. I used to unknowingly overshare traumatic experiences. I manage this aspect of myself much better now, but occasionally a story about my family slips out. Upon encountering awkward silence, I usually attempt to shift the conversation with humor. About 2 years ago, he admitted that he tries to protect me by talking over me or downplaying the situation when I share. This led me to feel that I needed to diminish myself again while speaking with his mother. I was not as candid with her about sensitive topics as I would be with him or my friends. I found myself apologizing for speaking too much and so forth. Ironically, his mother later told me she did not mind and that I did not need to try to be less passionate or to speak less around her since she considers me family. Writing this is painful. My boyfriend genuinely tried to protect me, but it left me feeling insecure and invalidated. We discussed this matter, but it seems to have left a small scar. Another issue arises when I instinctively reach out for a hug, for instance, after returning home because I need a moment to calm down. He is my safe haven after all. If the hug lasts longer than about 10 seconds, he typically makes an effort to loosen the embrace, perhaps because he has other things to attend to. This is hurtful for me as well. I sometimes attempt to hold on a little longer and say, "Wait, give me some more time," but he just endures it. The same goes for when he wants to play video games, which I have no issue with. We also enjoy playing together after we finish dinner. About 1 to 2 times a week, I ask him to stay with me for a little while. I do not have any specific plans, I simply want to spend more time with him after a stressful day at work. Sometimes he stays, but most of the time he does not. I have never understood this. For me, it was clear that I expressed a need. "Please do not leave just yet, I want to share some more time with you." However, from his perspective, it was not as significant. After a significant argument a few weeks ago, he told me he always viewed this as our inside joke, like I was exaggerating my feelings about missing him while he was simply upstairs playing a game with a friend. I understand where he is coming from, but I am unsure what to do other than articulate the things I want and feel. I probably should have been more assertive and told him, "Please just stay with me for 20 more minutes, and then we can both engage in our separate hobbies." However, I felt like I was facing small rejections each time, so why would I push harder? I expressed what I wanted, so if he is so eager to play games, why would I try to stop him? I never intended to be the bothersome girlfriend. There is also the issue of mental load. As I mentioned, we both have ADHD, which makes it challenging to maintain the household. I have tried numerous strategies, using apps to motivate and remind him, telling him when it is his turn to handle a task, encouraging him to set calendar reminders like I do, and even suggesting that we hire a cleaner once a week, which he declined. I have explored various methods of sharing cleaning responsibilities, agreeing on what is essential during hard weeks, for example, ensuring the toilet remains clean for hygiene reasons. It is less critical if we do not vacuum for several weeks. After a discussion about this subject, he generally puts in an effort for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then suddenly it seems to revert to just me handling the cleaning. I take care of meal planning and grocery shopping online because he tends to annoy me during in-person grocery runs by constantly texting me for help and then purchasing the wrong items. It's as though I need to micromanage him. I handle cleaning and most laundry. In our 5 years together, he has never cleaned the windows, or in the last 3 years since we got the cat fountain, has he ever cleaned it or changed the filter. He often remarks, "The sink is disgusting," yet does nothing about it. "The garbage can stinks." I appreciate that he notices, but why not clean it up? He used to become upset when I told him it was his turn to clean. Not angry at me, which is an important distinction, but frustrated with the situation. However, let me assure you I grew extremely frustrated. I do not understand why I'm expected to think on his behalf while also making him upset, ultimately ruining our day. Consequently, I stopped addressing it. About 8 months ago, I simply ceased caring. I managed my fair share of the apartment each week, prepared meal plans, and cooked. He usually enjoys what I cook, which is wonderful, while getting my life in order to some extent. So I began to rely on myself. Another significant mistake. I have now reached a point where I have downplayed my feelings for him. I did not recognize this until a coworker illustrated what I was missing in my present relationship. Now I am left here still wanting to be with my boyfriend, whom I believed I would spend my life with, yet I also love someone else. My boyfriend is aware of this. We were very close to breaking up about a month ago. Strangely, he is completely certain that he still wants me and has promised to change. He intends to be emotionally available, show me his love, and be an equal partner regarding household responsibilities. In fact, he is actively making an effort. He has apologized for being passive while I have managed most household chores while also currently being our main income earner. He is pursuing a second education, and I am extremely proud of him for that. I am glad that he will finally feel more fulfilled in his work. He studies diligently, and I have no qualms about supporting him. This is what you do willingly when you love your partner. If he needs to prepare for exams, that is fine. He can inform me, and I will take on the brunt of the chores during that time. I take pleasure in doing small things like bringing him coffee or water to ensure he remembers to stay hydrated while studying. However, I become less inclined to help when I sense that I am being taken advantage of. I do not want to be taken for granted fundamentally. The dilemma is that even with the changes he has demonstrated, my heart feels somewhat numb. I still feel secure with him, and there is some warmth when he holds me close in the mornings, and I recognize that he does this to convey his intention to change, but the feeling quickly diminishes due to disappointment. I worry that I have waited too long and that my doubts are too profound. I am uncertain about what to do next. I have distanced myself from the coworker as much as possible and am attempting to create new memories with my boyfriend. However, my heart is so resistant. Why now at this moment? He is finally demonstrating his unwavering support and unconditional love. He is a caring and loving man, yet I doubt him. This seems profoundly unfair to me. I am the one who developed feelings for another man, so why is he not more hesitant? Why can I not simply move on and commit fully to rebuilding this relationship? Above all, how long does it take for feelings of love to fully return? A month is not a lengthy period, I understand, but I am genuinely struggling at this juncture. I love our cats, our apartment, and the garden, his family, and I must still love him. I cannot envision him marrying anyone other than me. We have always been each other's person, and he is genuinely the only individual with whom I can be my true self. I feel safe here. He obviously loves me. Why is this not easier? Story 3. My partner of a month thinks I'm a liar after I admitted to chatting with a guy from TikTok. You've crossed a line, he said, and now I'm left begging to regain his trust despite me always owning my mistakes. Can love survive in this tangled mess? My partner and I have only been officially together for a little over a month, but before that we had been talking, navigating a situationship, and hanging out for a year and a half. Things became more serious and consistent this past May. During that time, with no established boundaries or expectations of one another, there were many gray areas. Generally, during that time, we got along well. I enjoyed spending time with him, and throughout this situation, I had always hoped he would be mine exclusively, but I never thought we would become anything more than a situationship. I did everything I could to spend more time with him. I took up skiing so I could ski with him. I would sit and fish with him. I would listen to him discuss his interests for hours and even adopt some of them as my own. I would purchase anything I could if it was something he desired, and I even took him on a trip with me this past January. However, the situation had its ups and downs. There were times when we would discuss having a future together, and then there were times I wouldn't hear from him as often and he wouldn't invite me to hang out frequently. During the low points, I would always ask him if he was seeing anyone else, if he was talking to anyone else, or if he didn't want to be with me. His response was always no, and he would say he was feeling depressed. However, during one of these phases, two of my friends sent me a photo of him on Hinge. This upset me, but when I talked to him about it, he admitted it and said he liked the validation. I told him I disliked it but couldn't stop him since we weren't officially dating, and I liked him too much to let him go, even if it hurt. In November, after what I believed was an exclusive relationship since May, we tested positive for chlamydia, even though I had tested negative in August. I wasn't seeing anyone else, and he claimed he didn't know how it happened. He has a history of antibiotic resistance, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. In February, we tested positive for ureaplasma again. I had tested negative for months prior, and he again told me he didn't know what had happened. I gave him the benefit of the doubt once more, even when my logic suggested otherwise, because my feelings for him were too strong. I also considered that I was continuously asking him if there was anyone else, which he always denied. Additionally, there were instances when I would see other girls texting him, or I would catch glimpses of their Bitmojis as suggestions when he would send something, like a website or photo. Throughout this, he consistently denied talking to other people, claiming that they were obsessed with him. As always, I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I knew my feelings for him were far stronger than I could control. Around February of this year, I noticed he was distancing himself. He would go entire days without contacting me and always seemed to have something to do when we spent time together. He wouldn't text or call me as frequently and stopped inviting me skiing as he had done in the past. I could feel him pulling away, but at that point, I didn't know what to do. I had already asked him repeatedly if he was seeing anyone else. Regardless of my intuition, his answer was always no, and I believed him. At the same time, I received a direct message from another guy on TikTok who eventually asked for my Snapchat. I provided it to him and we became friends, mostly discussing skiing and joking with one another. I never considered it anything more than friendship, nor did I intend to take it further. The most flirtatious exchanges were the photos I sent him in my gym clothes and jokingly reciprocating compliments. He invited me to visit a state park he was planning to go to in my area, and while I entertained the idea, I had no real intention of attending. I engaged with his suggestions of meeting because I enjoyed the attention, even though I didn't plan to follow through. My situationship at that time saw a notification from him on my phone and later asked me about him. Immediately, I lied about how I knew him. I am unsure why. I think it was mainly due to feeling embarrassed about how I met him. From that point on, he pressed me for the entire truth, and an argument ensued that lasted over 3 days. I gradually started mentioning the joking compliments and the invitation, and he saw the photos in our chat because I allowed him to look through my phone. It took several days to disclose the complete truth, but during that time I was insisting I was being entirely truthful, which only became apparent at the end. I shouldn't have lied, and I recognize that. I have apologized repeatedly. I am not certain why I lied. Maybe it was because I would be upset if he were in my position, or perhaps because I knew it was wrong. He wanted to end things after that, but I did not. We continued to spend time together after that incident in which I had lied to him about the guy on my Snapchat, and I promised him I would do anything to earn back his trust. Eventually, at some point, we made our relationship official, and he became my boyfriend. We were immediately very affectionate with one another. The primary reason we began dating was because during our argument we confessed that we were in love with each other. Not long after we made things official, I went to babysit for a family I have been working with since I was 15. The child is now 12 but views me as an older sister, which is why they still invite me to come around because he wants to see me. His parents see me as their daughter. The father has made some uncomfortable advances at times and has implied that he finds me attractive, even giving me substantial amounts of money and other small gifts. This began when I was 20, and it was an awkward situation with the father, but I understood that they generally saw me as part of the family. I never analyzed it too deeply. At the end of the night, my boyfriend asked me when I was leaving. I was unsure when they would return, so I told him 11 p.m. At 11 p.m., he texted me asking if I had left yet. I replied that I had not and asked him to wait about 15 more minutes. Those 15 minutes passed, and I hadn't left yet, as I was just chatting with the family as a whole. I repeated that same sequence of events until 12 a.m. when I finally was able to leave, which is typical with this family. Once I left, I sensed my boyfriend was upset. He was not answering my calls and was being quite unresponsive to my texts, providing very dry and brief replies. I didn't understand what I had done wrong, except for my lack of communication regarding the timing. He began indicating that he was uncomfortable with the father, believing the entire situation was strange. I immediately became defensive and stated I didn't see how the father was a threat when I was with the entire family, and I couldn't comprehend why he thought it was odd. We went back and forth in an argument for a while, and I didn't grasp why he found it strange. I eventually told him that he was letting his insecurities interfere with how another man perceived me, which was not the appropriate thing to say at that moment, especially by calling him insecure. I didn't intend for it to be taken that way, but it hurt him, and I recognized that. I also now understand that he was genuinely concerned for my safety around the father and that my involvement with this family might be overwhelming. I acknowledge his worries about the situation now, but I didn't at the time, and it took me a while to comprehend it. We both discussed addressing this issue with our therapists. My therapist suggested setting boundaries, such as not staying with the family so late and improving communication while I am with them, as well as working on compromising. We had a conversation about how we would proceed. I shared my therapist's advice and asked if he had anything to contribute. He passively indicated that he did not. I suggested that he meet them to make his presence known, but he was reluctant. Later, he expressed concern about not wanting me to attend a planned birthday dinner for the child's birthday. The child had invited me because he wanted me there. It was to include the family and myself. I didn't understand why he didn't want me to go and what was so problematic about the situation. I had to work the night of the dinner anyway, and out of frustration, I told him, "Fine, I won't go, I have to work anyway." It is important to note that my boyfriend works at the same restaurant as I do. The birthday dinner approached. The night before, his parents sent me a reminder text, and I informed them that I couldn't attend because I had to work. I suggested they could stop by to pick up a gift I had for the child since my restaurant is located down the street from where they were going. I thought quite literally they had just received 5-star service from a Michelin star restaurant. I didn't expect them to stay, just to stop by, have a brief conversation, and leave. They suggested staying for dessert, and I didn't want to turn them down because it was the child's birthday, even though my boyfriend would also be working. On the evening of the dinner, I prepared the child's gift before my shift. My boyfriend asked me what it was, and I told him it was for the child and that they would be stopping by for dessert. After that, he shut down and went silent. I told him I didn't want him to be upset and asked what was wrong, but he told me it was nothing, yet remained silent all night. Later that evening, I attempted to discuss what was bothering him. He was upset with me for inviting them when he had expressly told me he didn't want to meet them, and he felt betrayed by my actions. I insisted that I didn't invite them. In my mind, I didn't invite them to stay for dessert. In his perspective, since I suggested they stop by, he interpreted it as an open invitation for them to linger, viewing my statement as a lie, which I understand. While the family was at the restaurant, I was texting him as much as I could, especially since he was supposed to pick me up. I was trying my best to keep him informed while also limiting my time with the family, which came to around 30 minutes. However, in this situation, I violated his trust and crossed a boundary of his, regardless of my viewpoint. He feels as if I completely disregarded my therapist's advice and disrespected him by ignoring our previous conversation. We discussed this incident. I emphasized the importance of prioritizing communication, expressing clear boundaries, and working towards understanding one another. I told him repeatedly that I wanted to do right by him and understand how I could meet his needs. However, since I lied in this situation, even if it was a half-truth, he now sees me as a liar. He does not trust anything I say. He believes there is more to the Snapchat issue, no matter how many times I assure him it was never sexual. He doubts my account of a hookup I had before we started dating again. He is unconvinced I had no intention of meeting the guy from Snapchat. He does not trust anything I say, and he is completely unwilling to accept my reassurances. I acknowledge that I have made mistakes and caused him pain in this relationship. However, I consistently take responsibility for my errors, recognize where I went wrong, and actively work towards improving my behavior. Once he identifies something that crosses a line, I cease to do it. He also has borderline personality disorder, and I have researched extensively to understand him better and his reactions and feelings. I feel that neither of us has been perfect, especially before we became official. There have been numerous occasions when I have given him the benefit of the doubt, and I am unsure what to do, if anything, to receive the same treatment in return. I realize that it appears toxic and chaotic, and it is. Yet it is something I do not wish to abandon, especially not easily. I have expressed to him that I want to improve our communication. I want to prove to him that I am trustworthy, and I am continuously learning about myself and how his reactions can help me become a better partner for him. I just don't know what to do in this situation. I do not want to give up, and I cannot understand why my heart is unwilling to let go. Story 4. A year after my terrifying night in a mental ward, I still replay it endlessly. Why didn't I want to live? I asked. After a wild trip and a plea for water, I discovered I never had an IV. Did I imagine it all? The truth continues to haunt me. In December of 2023, I decided I did not need to stay for 2024. I attempted to use pills, began to suffocate, and then panicked. I called 911 and ended up in a mental hospital for a week. When I left, I felt renewed hope, but within a day, I quickly returned to feeling depressed and dissociating. The next day, I was languishing in bed, dissociating, when I suddenly snapped back to reality. I had reached my limit. Why did I not want to live? The answer was gender dysphoria. A completely new world opened up to me. I was transgender. No wonder I did not feel like a person. I did not recognize myself. I suddenly understood that I was a blank canvas and was eager to fill in that canvas. What better way to do that than by smoking large amounts of cannabis, right? Okay, so that was not a wise choice. I am not sure what I expected to achieve, although introspection can be beneficial. I suppose I thought I could somehow awaken this alternative true self hidden away in my mind. Regardless, it became a coping mechanism. I did not know how to proceed with discovering who I am as a person, and getting high became my solution for 2 months. Toward the end of that first month, I noticed a new product that I believed could aid me in my journey to self-discovery. It was mushroom microdose gummies. The first packet I tried was enjoyable. It made colors appear more vibrant. In the middle of the second month, I went to buy another packet. Unfortunately, this specific product would soon be recalled for sending individuals to the hospital. Of course, this happened not long before it sent me to the hospital. The second packet was markedly different. At the time, I had no idea that I was experiencing a trip. It was quite enlightening. I suddenly felt capable of articulating my thoughts aloud without feeling like I would implode. I felt as though my voice was finally deserving of being heard, and so I spoke, non-stop, just to myself. It felt liberating. 3 days before my hospitalization, I stopped drinking water and eating, yet I continued to talk. Speaking occupied most of my time. Well, that and slowly spiraling while pursuing the highest of highs. I did not consider how much water I was losing without replenishing it. On the third day without food or water, I consumed 2 gummies and got high. Within an hour, I began to overheat, and soon after, I started losing consciousness. At some point, I ran out of my apartment, tumbled down some stairs, and began shouting. My roommate called 911, and I recall snippets of the first responders. I tried to communicate with them, only to black out again. When I regained consciousness, I attempted to mime my thoughts, then blacked out once more, and I remember shouting even more. Eventually, I woke up and saw only my roommate standing nearby. I asked him what was happening. He informed me that I had been screaming for hours. I inquired about the first responders. They left an hour ago because I refused to say whether I wanted to get in the ambulance. I regret ever saying the words, "call them back." I should have just tended to my wounds, drank a lot of water, showered, eaten something, and figured things out on my own. Instead, I took an ambulance ride. When I arrived at the hospital, they administered an intravenous line. I remember it vividly. The nurse looked at me while eyeing the IV and explained that the needle would be removed so that nothing would be left in my arm. I thanked her because intravenous lines have always made me anxious. I worry about bending my arm. I was given some medication and soon fell asleep. I awakened unsure how much time had passed and immediately noticed that there was no IV in my arm. The nurses soon entered and I asked them what had happened to the IV. One nurse told me that someone probably removed it while I was asleep. Probably? I asked her to check and she assured me she would. I never saw that nurse again. At some point, I stood up to speak with the staff and noticed a saline bag sitting beneath my stretcher. I assumed someone must have come in to connect me to saline and removed the IV because it was empty. They will attend to it eventually. In the meantime, I guess I would have another psychotic break and try to leave the mental ward to jump into the local lake because I had now realized I need water for survival. I was medically detained by the state and my nightmare began. After that entire ordeal, my throat was extremely sore and I was given a cup of water. I savored it, but I knew I would need more. I asked once again for water and was initially told no. I asked again, stating my need for water. The nurse brought me a cup and informed me that it would be my last for the night and that he would be locking my door. I mentioned that I was dehydrated and that they even had a saline bag under my cart. Perhaps I could receive another IV. No, I was told because I had removed the first IV, making me a risk, and they could not poke me again. The nurse instructed me to go to sleep, but his words replayed in my mind. I pulled it out when I was asleep, right? But then where is it? And why does my throat hurt so much? Common sense would tell me I had been screaming for hours, which would explain the pain. However, common sense often eludes you when you are mentally unstable, so I assumed I had removed the IV and swallowed it while asleep or blacked out. That cup of water was soon gone. Shortly after, I began to overheat, tugging at my hair as my brain felt like it was overheating. But he locked the door and I couldn't go out to ask for more. I spent the rest of the night alternating between begging and shouting for water and crying uncontrollably because I was convinced that if I fell asleep, I would suffocate on the non-existent IV in my throat and die. Eventually, I did fall asleep and I did not die, obviously. The next morning, I was filled with anger and confusion, but it was a new shift, so perhaps I could finally get answers. What happened to the IV in my arm? But the door, I tested the door handle to discover it opened. Did he lie about locking it? Can these doors even lock? Never mind, we have more urgent questions to address. What happened to my IV nurse? You never had an IV put in. I do not know what came over me, but I immediately replied, "This is why no one likes you." The nurses, of course, pointed out that my response was unkind, unnecessary, and rude, and I simply returned to my concrete room and cried. It was indeed unnecessary and rude, I agree, but for goodness sake, you are supposed to keep notes on this situation. There is no way I imagined her inserting that IV. I vividly recall her words, her face, her calming smile, the damn needle entering my skin. There is no way I could have fabricated him telling me that I pulled the IV out and thus could not receive saline. His annoyance with me was palpable. He wanted me to just shut up and be quiet, so which is it? Did a nurse put in my IV and another nurse remove it? Did I remove it? Or did I never have one to begin with, and am I actually crazier than I had ever imagined? I know now that I was not in danger, but the terror I felt was incredibly real. Who knows how many times I screamed that I needed water. Later, I asked one of the nurses if they could hear what we said in the rooms. She responded, "Oh no, we do not pay attention to what you say in the rooms." Well, that just sums it up perfectly, I suppose. I feel so foolish. I know I cannot change it now, but I keep replaying that night in my mind. What if I had said this? What if I had tried that? What if I did not have to suffer in fear for hours, convinced that I would die if I fell asleep? What if I did not have to beg for water? What if that saline bag had been connected? It does not matter. The mental hospital put me on risperidone and I experienced firsthand what it is like to be bipolar and manic for over a month. I empathize with you, my bipolar friends. So much was said and done that I am embarrassed by, so incredibly out of character for me as well. Medications are important, folks, just make sure they are the right ones. I was going to end up messed up by the system either way. I just wish it would not keep me awake over a year later. I guess I am pulling an all-nighter tonight, everyone.